on Ustream, and we are broadcasting, and we're here to have a bunch of fun. Good to see you, Daryl. Yeah.
Good to see y'all. Good to be here.
Yeah, awesome. And I was just curious. Now, I was asked to take care of the Cult of Honesty tonight, and I know that a number of topics have come up that haven't always been pursued. But did you have any topic you think would be awesome to talk about? Or, I mean, because Chris has suggested the possibility of talking about human exceptionalism.
Human exceptionalism?
Well, Chris, you might want to define what you mean by that.
Oh, okay. Well, it's more of human exceptionalism would be an explanation as to why humans, well, from a theistic point of view, why humans would have domain over all of the other animals on the planet, and from an atheistic perspective, why humans get specific and better treatments than other animals, especially from an atheistic perspective or an evolutionary perspective, since we all consider ourselves animals. Why, as humans, we have privileged existence amongst the animal kingdom.
Okay, that sounds like a good topic.
Because it's a little bit of a conundrum, right? Because I mean, at least in the atheistic world, from an ethical perspective, it raises some interesting questions, I think.
Well, particularly if you value life, life itself rather than just human life, it makes you realize, and given our understanding of evolution, it seems evident that we as human beings haven't always been here, and it's highly likely we're not always going to be here, even if life continues on the planet. And it's even possible that some other species could actually eventually come along that would possess remarkable intelligence. And who knows? And that might be something long after our extinction, or something concurrent with it,
So, and it just, I find it interesting. Hold on, I'm going to turn my video off for a second, because
Okay.
I'm gonna run upstairs real quick.
Okay.
But I'm going to continue talking.
Okay.
Well, are we actually on the chat now?
I believe that we are, Daryl, and
Okay.
The truth is, I don't get much feedback when I'm doing this. I don't have enough computers in here to see exactly what's going on Ustream while I'm doing this, and from what I can see, it looks to me like there's a real sputtering delay, but I can't tell that. I'm hoping that somehow maybe if there is any serious problem, Joey would give me a call, or Dr. Jones would.
Okay, so are they there now, or is it just us?
Right now, it's just us three, because there were some technical problems going on down there in the studio, and Joey also had other work he had to get done, even though he's there in the studio. And there were two people who are going to be helping out who aren't there tonight, and so it's like overload. And whoop, we lost Chris there for a moment. Hopefully he'll show back up. But yeah. So anyway, did you get a sense of what was meant there when he talked about human exceptionalism? A sense of
I like the cat. It's definitely a topic worth discussing, I think.
Can you guys hear me now?
Sure. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that. I must have lost connection somehow on my travels upstairs.
Yeah. And then we saw your picture come on, and then you suddenly disappeared on us. But
I'm sorry.
Yeah. By the way, did you have the Ustream thing running there, Chris?
I didn't.
Yeah.
Why did you hear an echo?
No, I didn't. But I was just curious if I'm curious to find out, because what I'm looking at here, I'm hoping it's just because the program I'm using is prioritizing the broadcast. I'm just hoping that the Google Hangout itself, when it shows up, is not being radically stilted and delayed, and I can't tell. But anyhow,
Well, I'll look it up now, and I'll just mute it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And
Okay, so I'm sorry. I don't know how much of what I said came through, but to put it as in summary form, from a theistic perspective, it just seems like a. Oh, it actually looks really nice on Ustream.
Good.
It seems like it's wrapped up nicely because in Genesis, God gives the earth and the animals to the humans to have dominion over.
Mm-hmm.
So like human exceptionalism is accounted for just like that. Whereas for the atheist, if we were to carry out logically our philosophy, as put through people and philosophers and ethicists like Peter Singer, we should all be vegetarians.
Possibly, yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, if you're to take it to like certain logical extremes, human exceptionalism has some weird, like we shouldn't be doing any animal testing. There should be no, research done on animals, and there should be no cruelty. We should be really sensitive towards certain things.
Yeah.
And I just think that it's an interesting.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing that we can start. We can go in a lot of different directions.
Yeah. Daryl,
like,
I
how
muted.
do we account for the fact that we have this agriculture based economy in certain areas where we can treat animals as poorly as we do.
Yeah, I could see how from an atheist standpoint, but I'm not an atheist, so it's not easy for me to see from this standpoint. I could see how from an evolutionary atheistic standpoint that one could either conclude that we are all here together in life and need to find a way of taking that together, or that we're all adapting, and this is what we're human beings are doing, is adapting, and it's other life forms' responsibility to adapt for themselves and deal with what we're doing. And so I could see how that could also come to play, but doesn't that sound it shows a certain attitude, which I think human beings are very capable of having without regard to which is perhaps even a part of that attitude of human exceptionalism. So I think it's possible that this is a question that is not necessarily divided by atheist and theist lines. And in fact, I would say that even for theists, that although dominion was over the earth, there are some who would consider that a responsibility of stewardship, rather than saying one of saying, well, yeah, hey, I don't care what happens to all those. But then this is interesting that we talk about the being vegetarians. I mean, because lions aren't vegetarians, cheetahs aren't vegetarians, and there's plenty of creatures that are not, and there's plenty of creatures that eat bugs, and not everything eats vegetables. So, even
vegetables are living things, So.
Yeah. So why aren't we all aritarians, right?
There you go.
Wouldn't that be rough? I can't imagine.
Oh, that's a movement. That's a real movement. I didn't make that up.
Wow.
Yeah, right. But I'm not. What specifically do they suggest? I mean, if we're not that we kind of synthesize food out of
nourishment out of air. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I honestly don't know much details about it, but it's it is super fringe, obviously.
Well, it's also we can't. I mean, we've got hydroponic plants, but hydroponic people, I don't picture it.
We don't photosynthesize.
Right? Yeah, that would
creates
be
a problem, doesn't it?
Yeah. By the way, there is a place nearby here where we live that where we can buy the hydroponic lettuce, and it's awesome. It really is delicious.
Oh, yeah.
And it's clean, and but and it lasts forever in the refrigerator. And we've been buying a lot of our veggies there because they taste so much better. They're fuller. Yeah.
That reminds me of a question for you. So in the news lately, they've been talking a lot about this test tube meat that they can make hamburgers out of, as an alternative to because you brought up the hydroponic lettuce, and because we kind of were talking about human exceptionalism as it relates to agriculture and cruelty to animals in agriculture and stuff, this test tube meat that is going to be used for hamburgers would be an alternative to not only greenhouse gases that are produced by this mass agriculture use of mistreatment of animals, but it would also be a solution to the mistreatment of animals. What do you guys think about that?
That's quite interesting.
I mean, have you seen it in the news?
I've seen it, and I haven't caught enough of it to know exactly where this meat is coming from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's genetically synthesized proteins.
Wow.
Apparently, it tastes a little dry when they cook it up in hamburger format.
Yeah.
Probably because there's not any of the real animal fats in it, or other things that where a lot of that beef gets its flavor. But
But I mean, I don't know. It's definitely a Frankenburger. I mean, how else do you describe it? It's a Frankenburger. It's a test tube meat product. So I mean, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it yet. But it just, when you mentioned the hydroponic lettuce, it just kind of leaned me towards, that particular news story. And since there is human exceptionalism, and since we have these control over certain variables. And
wow,
why wouldn't we use our the fact that we are a little bit different than the rest of the animal kingdom in our ability to self-reflect and predict the future and use those abilities and symbol systems to advance in technology the way that we have to overcome this cruelty industry that we've created.
Wow,
yeah.
That would be something else. What's you were about ready to say something, Daryl?
Well, I was going to share a thought that I have. I guess it's I have somewhat of a philosophy, you might say, about things in general, and especially people, and It kind of stems from a statement that you read that's attributed to the Apostle Paul. He made a statement, and then he began to talk about something. He said, "Let me show you the most excellent way." And then he begins to talk about this thing called love. And I'm somewhat convinced that that probably is the best way for humanity, for those who can understand the concept. And my philosophy kind of goes that there probably is a most excellent way about everything. And that would be the reason for us all to come together and input and, share thoughts like we're having, such as now, on topics such as exceptionalism. And I guess my thoughts on that would be along the lines of what would be best for us all. And when I think of humanity, I think of someone who's been given more ability to think and to reason. That's not to say that, there is no thought or reason among any other species. But to me, rather than it may put us in a position of dominance, it should put us in a position of responsibility.
Yeah. So there may be a sense there in which what you're saying is that we could even consider as a possibility. I'd be curious what Chris would say about this. That maybe we as human beings are, in some sense, exceptional, but with that exceptionalism comes a responsibility. It kind of reminds me of like the Spider-Man movie thing there,
With great with great something comes great responsibility. With great power comes great responsibility, or
something like that. Yeah.
Well, it kind of goes along with the thinking of, this is something I've wrestled with for a number of years, the idea of maturity, whether it be considered spiritual maturity or just the maturing process because of age or because of, even if it's the school of hard knocks, whatever it might be. But used to, it seems like I thought of it more in terms of, the mature ones have to just put up with the immature ones. It's like, oh, there's such a drain on me. But it really I think in reality it's the other way around. If you've got someone that is developing and maturing as they should, then they're the ones that actually should be able to bring others, into that position and have the patience and the ability to, encourage others to go a better direction. And so, it would fall along the same lines of what I'm talking about here, and the funny thing is, when I think about exceptionalism and think about the Christian viewpoint, I would say of most Christians, as you were bringing out, Chris, it is brought up in the book of Genesis, where God supposedly, gives man the authority over all the animals and so forth. I think, really, I don't know if one of y'all have seen the movie, The Gods Must Be Crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And the little...
With the Coke bottle, right?
Yeah. And the little guy, he's very hungry, and so he very humanely, I don't know, I think it was, he had a little poison on his tip. It didn't really hurt the animal. I mean, he just felt the sting, and then he kind of went to sleep. And then he went and apologized to the animal. He said, I'm sorry I have to do this to you, but I'm very hungry, or something along that line. And I thought, what a respect, for that which is doing something for you, And, as far as becoming a vegetarian, I think it's wrong to, kill an animal for the meat or whatever. I can honestly say I've not given a lot of thought to that, but I can't say that I look at that as being wrong in and of itself. But to be inhumane in the process and to not have a mature view of that, to do it the most humane way possible and be appreciative and be respectful toward the ones that are feeding you.
There are some who might even argue that the biblical view of heaven, when the lion lays down with the lamb, as it were, is going to be a day where, where all of this stuff that involves predators is just simply not going to exist anymore. And so that'd be kind of, I don't know how many people would go along with that, but it appears that whatever sense of the afterlife is coming along, it doesn't involve this predatory kind of relationship. But this brings up the question.
Isn't that a euphemism for peace, though?
Could be, yeah. It may be. I'm not. I have nothing invested in what it might mean, but it does make me wonder. Suppose we, right now, it's merely an ethical, theoretical question because we don't have the ability to sustain ourselves in good health without somehow making use of certain foods. And I would wonder if our current state of the human race is that some people could do well as vegetarians and some people might not be able to do so well with it. And we haven't evolved to the point where we can all do that, perhaps. But then it comes the question, what do we do if we do get to that point? Do we try to bring the animals along? Do we try to feed the substitute protein to the lion? Do we try to, now, love what the bees do with the nectar, and things like that. Mm-hmm. But the truth is, when it comes to eating certain vegetables, it seems to me that almost is like their purpose. Eating an apple, they show up every year, and it's a renewable resource. Whereas, I'm not sure about other foods, but I mean, you have to replant the broccoli seeds every year, I guess. By the way, no green thumbs here, none. I can't. I ruin everything I try to deal with. But how far do we take it, Chris?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that I don't think that anyone would start arguing for lion exceptionalism. Or, you know what I mean? I don't think that it would be taken philosophically to that extent. And if we were to use evolutionary philosophy or evolutionary psychology or, the evolutionary theory as a basis, we could say that predators are built to capture their prey. We're not built to capture prey. If we were left in nature with a buck knife and running shoes, we wouldn't really catch much. What our advantage is our ability to build instruments that allow us to capture prey, to outsmart it. It's the cognitive process that we have that gives us the advantage to build traps to capture our prey, because our might does not make us very good predators for much.
True, but then there are monkeys that actually will take twigs to stick into ant hills, and they use that as a tool to eat the ant. You know,
so that's it. So that brings up a really good question. So so is our exceptionalism in the animal kingdom on a continuum, such that we are at one end, and there are animals that that fulfill this continuum? You know, like you were saying, like bonobos and apes and chimps and instrument users, and primates might be on the shifting end of the continuum towards us, and non-instrument users are behind them. I mean, I'm riffing right now. I'm throwing stuff against the wall to see what sticks.
We also have the ability to speak language, although we do have reason to believe that there may be other beings who communicate quite articulately. The combination of our ability to use tools and the ability to communicate with each other, it allows us to inspire at a far more sophisticated level. Certain animals, hunt in packs, and they take on certain roles as they do so. And there's a sense in which they conspire, but they don't have anywhere near the flexibility we have.
I'm going to take it a step further and broaden the communication thing into the use of symbol systems.
Okay.
I think that's really what separates us, because I think that communication is used amongst whales communicate, birds communicate.
Sure.
I mean, what they communicate is pretty raw. It's like, I am here and I'm ready for sex. You know what I mean? That's pretty much what they're communicating in pretty raw primal terms, but it's communication nonetheless.
I've tried that and it doesn't work.
I know it doesn't work well. We humans need much more nuance than that. We require much more nuance than that.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Well, here's a question that we haven't brought into the equation. So far we've really just covered the eating of certain animals. There's other animals that we ride, such as horses, or there's other ones that we try to get rid of, such as rats. And so we would have to bring that into question. What is the humane thing there? What responsibility do we have? In other words, do we need to get rid of rat traps or rat poison and let them go ahead and multiply and take over our houses?
I know. What's the difference between a pet and a pest?
Yeah.
When a mouse is in a cage, it's our pet. When a mouse is in our wall, it's a pest.
Yeah. The mouse is an example of something that fits into both categories very easily. Yeah. Go ahead, Daryl.
Well, I was just going to say, to me, it goes back to this thing of responsibility, which I think humanity as a whole has been very irresponsible. And, I look at even the, if you will, the Native Americans, or what we refer to as the Indians, even them, it seems to me in all the cases, they had a better philosophy than the ones that came and took over again. And, I remember out in northwest Texas, the Palo Verde Canyon, they had a little buffalo would just go off the cliff and land at the bottom and would die.
By the way, Daryl, as you were doing that, things that are coming through were extremely rough. Could you say that again?
Sure. Out in northwest Texas, the Palo Verde Canyon, I was being given a sort of a tour, and they were talking about how the Indians years ago would drive buffalo off the cliffs into the canyon below, so that it would kill the buffalo. But then they in turn would go down to the bottom of the canyon, and they would use everything that came from the buffalo. But they couldn't eat. They would use the fur. They would use the bone to make meal. and they would only kill as many as they needed to sustain themselves. And to me, I look at that as being very responsible and, uh, you know,
Respectful.
Exactly. And, why didn't we learn from that? But here the white man came over and taught them Christianity, which is something not near as respectful or responsible as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. How does Indian behavior change the question of exceptionalism? Because it was now I'll be honest with you. Anthropologically, I haven't studied enough about the Indian culture to know if this is hype or real. Did all Indian cultures seem to exhibit this respect, or just certain ones? I don't. I don't really.
That's a good question. I think that in general, Native American cultures had more of a focus on animism in their spirituality.
Yeah.
So they worshipped the animal spirits. So I think to answer your question and how that relates to human exceptionalism is the boundaries that we have now, where there are humans and then there are animals, didn't exist. I think it was much more liquid, for Native Americans, and I think that's why they had so much respect for coyotes and buffaloes and the animal spirits that they worshipped.
Wow.
Because they saw them as gods.
Yeah.
They thought it was a privilege that they got to be able to eat the meat and use the skin of the animals that sustained their lives, because they were taking that into them and becoming part of that. You know what I mean? It was like that kind of taking into their body and becoming part of that.
And isn't that a far more the gratitude that seems to be a part of that when you compare it to the evolution means if we win, we win, and if you lose, you lose. You're gonna have to adapt on your own. A radically different attitude than what we seem to see in the in this concept that we get here concerning the Indian, where there was and I've heard, by the way, I've heard that before, Daryl, about the buffalo, that they would use every part and we're responsible. And by the way, this is, to me, this is one of the things that I find crazy about so-called conservatism. If from what I understand about the philosophy of being conservative, which means trying to manage scarce resources to conserve them, I just don't understand why people who call themselves conservatives are not the most adamant environmentalists. Doesn't make sense to me, but I'll tell you, I in many ways there's ways in which I'm sure I abuse the environment, but I don't know what else to do in part of a culture. There's almost a sense in which you can't pull the tide even away if you're so out of the river, so it's a tough thing to know what to do there. And but I share a sense of that need to find an ethical balance of not just because we need to be nice to animals, but the point I'm trying to make is that we don't understand how interdependent all of the ecological balance on Earth is. The truth is, all the life that is here now is the result of an ongoing process where everything kind of worked out together. We all arrived here together. And by the way, this is one of the objections I think is valid to GMOs, in that we're giving certain, we talk about giving an orange the ability to resist certain diseases. Well, okay, but what's going to happen to those diseases that are based on life forms, are they going to then if somehow spring upon us with super diseases? It's like we're giving an advantage to a particular organism that wasn't developed gradually, and that didn't give the other organisms an opportunity to say, "Oh, okay, I can up the ante over here with some adaptation I can make." And what does this do to the overall sense of balance? Are we tipping a house of cards here? That's one thing I think that we need to consider more wisdom with that. Although I think that there's a lot of strange, crazy non-science that's involved in the worry about GMOs. But that's one that I think of as possessing some valid consideration.
That's an interesting point. It's almost like man-made punctuated equilibrium. You know what I mean? Instead of taking incremental steps, it's like we're taking man-made leaps.
Right.
In potential evolution of, the bacteria or, diseases or fungi or things that can potentially attack the foods that we eat.
Yeah.
Well, we've done that, I think, probably on a lot of levels. Here where I live, there's a lot of forest, and they've learned how to grow boards, that we use to build houses with. Instead of it taking, say, 40 years, they can grow them in 20 years now. And the result is the lumber that we have doesn't last as long. It twists a lot easier. It's not near the quality of the older lumber. And, I think we're guilty of that. I've heard horror stories about the production of chickens that we eat.
Oh my!
They're raised. I mean, it's terrible.
They're so big. They're so big in their chest that they, for the big breast meat, that they can't walk.
And they fall over.
Yeah. And they're raised above each other in little.
I'll tell you what. I had to rebuild my house after a flood. Back in '06, flood destroyed the house. I had to gut it. I had to remove a lot of studs that were there since the house was built. The house was about 85 years old at the time. Wonderful, solid studs in that house.
Yeah.
And as I rebuilt some of the walls, I had to buy, new 2x4s. And I'll tell you, you go out and you buy like 100 2x4s and set them up in a corner there to work with. And as the weeks go by, if you don't put them up, boy, they start twisting and turning. And how do you build a wall that you intend to keep, I want my wall to be straight if it's brand new, and it made me wonder if I should have just gone with the aluminum studs, but I'll tell you, the wood just twisted and turned.
Yeah, it's mass produced, and that's we suffer on the quality, and it's to me it's all in the name of going the wrong direction,
Yeah. But they cut it while it's still green too, instead of waiting for it to dry, because it'll twist while it's green. But if it's a log, it twists in a way you don't notice it. Then when you cut it, it's done twisting.
Right.
Well, I mean, and if we go right down to the source, I mean, let's go right down to lumbering. I mean, lumbering has a problem because they oversaturate the area with the same kind of tree instead of just like they do in fields with agriculture. Instead of rotating the crop, so you're getting a poor quality of the tree to begin with. You're shortening the process, so the lower quality tree that you're getting is, half the amount of time is spent growing it, and then you're getting a lower quality product from the lower quality tree that spent half the time growing.
Yeah.
So it's like you can't win. So let's take this human exceptionalism thing and extend it to all living organisms, all the way down to plant sources. How do we have just respect in general for living things such that we can be sustainable?
That almost goes to a concept of not just human exceptionalism, but corporate exceptionalism, because the corporations stand to make a great deal more money if we have to rebuild the houses more often.
True.
And
true.
And now that I was telling somebody else, I said, well, now that corporations are persons, I consider Monsanto the personification of evil.
Persons. Well, then how come they don't have to go to war when they turn 18?
Yeah, and right, and why can't they suffer the death penalty when they commit capital crimes? Did you know that originally in this country, as in throughout the Western culture, that when corporations first came into existence, that they were really put together for a particular project. And upon the completion of the project, the corporation ceased to exist. Such as you might have a corporation set up to build a bridge. You know, when the bridge gets built, once the bridge is done, the corporation is over.
Dissolves.
Right. And then if they're going to build another bridge, that's a different corporation. And they might take different investors, different capitalists, different, whatever. But the concept of a corporation that never dies, that's kind of recent in the history of corporations.
Too big to fail.
Yeah. And that brings up the corporation exceptionalism, because I'll tell you what, think of all the power we as a human being could develop over time if we could, unlike our neighbor, live for 400 years, or multiple, so many years beyond that. Most people can only have a productive career from about the age of, say, 25 to 65. You're talking about 40 good years of productivity, but when a corporation can do that for 150 years, there's a lot of leverage you can collect in that time, particularly if you're still just as healthy an organization as you were, or even healthier.
Mm-hmm. So, but in a capitalist society, what, and I'm trying to redirect this back to, like an atheist-theist's distinction. There are theists that believe that the Bible leads towards a Godonomics exists.
Yeah,
I did not make that term.
I know. Hey, you know what?
That there is a capitalist structure and template via the Bible.
Yes, and it's interesting you should say that, because my uncle, Percy L. Graves, was an economics professor. He was he was one of Ludwig von Mises' star pupils, and was a good friend of his. In fact, when Ludwig von Mises passed away, Percy and his wife Bettina inherited the royalties and rights to a great deal of the publishing stuff from Mises. And this Austrian economics was something that they really considered in some ways to be very biblical. And there was a time when my uncle was the editor of a newsletter that was called The Christian Economist. We're going back way to like the 60s, I think, for that. But very, very much given to that concept. And he was actually, if it had been as popular back then, they probably would have called him a libertarian. But he was for a while research director of the National Republican Committee, but he had very much these philosophies of an almost Ayn Rand attitude towards money and capitalism.
Objectivism, huh?
Yeah,
that's tough. But what would be the atheistic perspective of that whole thing? What, like, just trust the economists? Just trust the method of the science of economy? Or economics, I should say.
I can't imagine
that's tough.
Well, not only because we can disagree over that. I mean, for example, the concept of even a free economy. I argue there's no such thing as a free economy. Everybody is over a particular barrel, and as a result of that, nobody is making any transactions or negotiations from a standpoint of equality to begin with. And as a result, the rules that are based upon the illusion of a free economy are really rules that, although we can claim they are free and we can claim they are fair, they really give advantages to the people who have the leverage. Period. And so it's disingenuous, in my opinion.
Well, you mentioned, Chris, Godonomics. Do you know a particular, I know a little about the different groups of thought, I guess I could say, among different denominations that have their ideas about how to get money. Basically, it's almost as if God is a big slot machine. And, you do certain things. As a matter of fact, I once knew a man, a preacher, and he used to use a little nursery rhyme. It's funny because I never heard the nursery rhyme growing up, but I heard him use it and illustrating a point. and it went like this: Little Tommy Tucker sang for his supper, and his point was he didn't sing because he had it; he sang to get it, and that's the idea behind this particular set of Godonomics, I guess. And that was that, you perform for God, and He will make sure that you get money and things and whatever.
Well, the specific when I say Godonomics, that's a buzzword that I picked up from the Creation Today ministry.
Oh, really?
Yes, it is an actual product from Eric Hovind's brother Chad.
Okay.
If I can put that fine a point on it.
Okay.
And I'm
That's
actually
probably
looking
why I
at
haven't heard of it.
I'm looking at the website now, and it reveals how the Bible supports free enterprise and entrepreneurship. You'll laugh and learn as he weaves together biblical history, philosophy, and a passion for business, with references to Adam Smith, C.S. Lewis, and Milton Friedman.
What website is that?
Godonomics.com.
No kidding.
I'm not even kidding.
I'm going to just put it up for a second here and see what. Yeah, there you go. Godonomics.com. But yeah, wow.
And I don't know any more about it than that, because I think that I would have to purchase the DVDs to learn more about it, and I'm not really willing to do so. For apparent reasons.
Yeah,
Not so much.
I'm a theist. I find value in the biblical text, but I certainly don't see it the way that many the fundamentalists or evangelicals do. But I tell you, in many ways, to be honest with you, I've had my fill with. I even mentioned this one day online. I think that that there's so much ignorance and immorality among people who are somehow trying to turn the biblical text into a shortcut for the hard work that honest living and honest work is for the rest of us. And it's just crazy.
They do that with everything, Bob. Whether it be healing, we were talking about that, and I know Dr. Jones likes to use the term "magic Jesus," and
right.
And I very much see his point in that. I've been involved in a lot of that, where you just pray for something and expect God to just do it, right then and there, and bypass anything that nature offers, or that the natural process, or any such thing. And they take it so far as to that this is what we should all do, and if we all did it, we would all get these instant things.
That's Christian exceptionalism, wouldn't you say?
Oh yes, I would say.
Yeah, and particularly when you get all those shortcuts,
Mm-hmm. A lot of prosperity preachers out there.
Oh yeah.
I never got it. I just don't understand. I don't get why so many people follow that message. It doesn't. To
me, it's about the same as the lottery. I had a lady ask me today, was I going to buy a lottery ticket, $400 and something million, and she said, you would actually only get 200 and something million. I said, well, why would I want that? That's not enough for anything. I mean, like I'm going to buy a lottery ticket and I'm going to win that. I see it kind of as a similar thing there, Bob. It's like playing the lottery. So and so seems to work for them. It worked for them.
Although I don't think that the prosperity gospel is preached by people who say, "Okay, send me your donations," and there's this chance that God is going to be blessing you. Because I'll tell you, if he's going to preach that there's this chance, then it's too much of a long shot. And my favorite movie moment when it comes to chance was in Dumb and Dumber when what is it? I can't think of the guy's name now.
Jim Carrey?
Jim Carrey. Yeah, Jim Carrey's talking to this girl, and he's saying, "Don't you think that a girl like me and a guy like you," and he's even messing up his words here, and she says, like, it's not going to happen, and he's, well, like, would you say the change? She says, one in a million, and his reaction is when he looks dejected, and then suddenly he looks up, and he's so full of hope as he's saying, so what you're saying is, there is a chance. It's a great moment. Great moment. Jim Carrey is capable of being so.
She was trying to communicate that it was a long shot, and he took it as like,
it's a shot.
I'll take it. I'll take it. Yeah. Yeah. And exceptionalism, I would say, is in some sense the belief that this ain't a long shot.
Mm-hmm.
The belief of what? Yeah?
That the things we're doing in our exceptionalism are not a long shot. That there's far much more guaranteed,
Right.
and it scares me, to be honest with you, that kind of thinking. And to be honest with you, although I don't know that I could take it to all the the animals and to stuff like that. I tell you what, if I was still alive at a time like that, I hope they develop something that tastes just like prime rib, and what have you. But if we would ever technologically get there to where we could do something like that, I would wonder if we would feel compelled, not only to do that, but to realize that we could somehow make it far more possible that if the planet itself were to die, our technology might even allow us to somehow find a way of escaping the planet.
Yeah, I mean that's always an option.
And was it? It's our good pal. Is it Nelson? Who is it who's saying that he thinks that our future in evolution involves, Borg-like adjustments to our body, that we take on, mechanical appendages and that we're going to combine technology and biology, and that this is the future of the human race, and that it's quite possible that thousands of years from now, that we as a human race will actually be technologically something in the memory of a computer or something, and
I think that was Nick.
It might have been Nate. Yeah, I can't remember where. But remember we had someone discussing that one day.
Well, evolution is definitely going to take on a very different shape, because we are now in control of our own environments in a very concrete way. And if we are adapting to our environments and we are now in control of our environments, evolution is going to take on a very different shape.
Sure. Yeah.
Yep.
That's unavoidable, and it's happening already.
Oh yeah.
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 It's already happening. In fact, even in terms of the legal situations, you've got things like we mentioned Monsanto before. There are people who have found that crossbreeding of their soy has gone into the next field, and because
they get sued for it.
They get sued for it. Yeah, which is like, I only planted stuff, and now that it turns out that through cross pollination, I end up with a product that's licensed.
Because of the wind.
Yeah, and
the wind blew seed over into their field. And
human food becomes something somebody owns the rights to. That scares me. To me, that's way too much of an option for real abuse.
Yeah, but I think what Supreme Court recently ruled that, or a High Court recently ruled that you can't copyright or patent genes.
Right.
Which was a fantastic ruling for the advancement of science.
Oh yeah, because it complicated the human need that impedes the advance of science.
Yeah, because there were companies that you could send into to do genetic testing to determine whether you were at risk for certain genetic diseases, and the company tried to patent the certain genetic sequence that allowed them to determine whether you had a biomarker for these genetic diseases, and the court said, no, you cannot patent that genetic sequence. It is in the intellectual commons for all humans because of the Genome Project. And that was a wonderful thing for science, because the repercussions of people being able to patent specific gene sequences would have been horrific.
Can't imagine. Yeah.
So.
Well, is there any part of, say, human exceptionalism that we should make sure we cover before we really kind of bring this to a conclusion? We really only have about 5 more minutes or so before we bring this to a close. So I'm curious, and we can go on a little bit longer if we have to, but what aspects of the potential for the consideration of exceptionalism have we not looked at?
Well, I think one thing, kind of along the lines of something else I brought up, but let's say for the farmer, the rancher, someone who either has livestock or even protection of human life, where you've got wild animals, danger, endangerment to different things. There's, I guess, when you're talking about human beings as opposed to any other species of being in the animal kingdom. It seems like there's quite a few categories that would have to be considered.
Yeah. I also think that we see currently white exceptionalism. I think that when we think of, say, the Jews as God's chosen people, this sometimes I think gets practiced in a manner or understood in a manner that that doesn't really speak well for the other conflicts that are created, and there's not to be. I would rather they were competing, on an equal footing rather than having. Because I've had some people say, to me that if I don't believe that the Jews are God's chosen people, that this somehow makes me anti-Semitic.
Oh yeah, I've heard that. Yeah, it is a problem in the way I see it. I think even Paul, if you read his writings, he really put that down.
He did.
Down. There was an exception there.
Right.
And that's what got him in trouble.
Yes.
With the Jews.
Right. In Christ there was no Jew nor Greek. So he kind of.
I also think we live in a male privilege or a male exceptional world as well. I mean.
That's true. Yeah.
That's why I think there are movements of what's the opposite of feminism, like male masculinism, or what's the
chauvinism? There's nothing that I'm aware of that men call it that is a positive.
Like men's equal rights for men. There are movements of that, and I can't think of the actual name of it. There are more pithy and concise titles, labels for those things that I can't. But they exist.
Yeah, of course. There's some like men who are trying to get more.
Serious.
Some men are trying to get more rights in terms of access to children after divorce, and things like that. The truth is, I think that in any subculture, any culture filled with subcultures, that there will be various different privileges that each subculture has over the others in certain ways. Weird people have an advantage when it comes to avant-garde art. They don't make
good for them.
Yeah, whatever. But anyhow, anything else that we might want to, though? I'm trying to think in terms of things we would want to at least mention. But
I can't think of it. I think we did a pretty good job taking care of the nooks and crannies.
Yeah, and I don't think that any one of us, the three of us, has any real investment in wanting to be in an abusive kind of exceptionalism. If anything, a responsible sense of exceptionalism is where we would be, and and I really think that in some ways that's also the way in which the human race is going to end up having the most peace. Is that as each of us recognize how different people, different races, different ethnic groups, different economic classes. Each of us possess certain exceptionalities, and yet we can accept these as things that we owe a responsibility to our fellow human beings. And as you might want to extend it there, as you were talking about, Chris, to even just, the whole planet.
Mm-hmm.
And so because the truth is, there are going to be people who are born with certain abilities that others just don't have. It's, some people have tremendous music skill, other people are very mathematic. Not everyone's born an Einstein. And so there's an opportunity for each of us to be exceptional in our own way. And
to me, that really defines the need for us to come together and, find that we have, to contribute. And I think by doing so, we can complete the picture. We can find the thing that works best. And look, I can say this to kind of explain what I'm talking about. If my eating meat depended on me going out and killing it and preparing it, I would probably be a vegetarian. I have no interest in that. If someone does, and I eat a hamburger and I enjoy it, but I still don't want them to abuse whatever it is that they are processing to make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
I'd probably still raise chickens. That's our main meat over here is chicken. Occasionally fish.
Chicken is good.
and we really limit beef to special occasions. And I'll tell you what, eating a hamburger. I had a hamburger today. In fact, we had a family picnic. So we were grilling stuff. And
nice.
But it's rare that we do that. Usually, if we're going to eat beef at all, prime rib, and I make it myself.
Delicious.
Oh yeah, and so, but other than that, it's just like not worth it. I'd rather
rather eat chicken.
I'm spoiled, I guess. It's fortunate to be so exceptional.
See, and the thing, so I live in Philadelphia, so I live in a nice metropolitan area, and we live by a lot of restaurants, and so, of course, and not to extend this too much further, but there are lots of picketing around restaurants that use certain foods that are deemed cruel, veal, foie gras,
right,
and to be honest, I'm a little bit of a foodie. I love eating crazy, wacky foods. Pig ears. I love foie gras. I love chicharrones. I love duck hearts and liver and pate and craziness. So I have more of a twisted perspective on food. I make my own sausage.
No kidding.
So yeah, absolutely. Sausage is delicious. So I would have no problem. I don't think. I mean, I go to pig butchering classes, so I don't think that I would have too much of a problem slaughtering my own animals. And I also, and I have a vegetarian niece, and just to bust her chops, I say, Grace, the more it suffers, the more delicious it is.
Oh, no.
I don't really believe that.
That's bad.
But just to bust her chops every once in a while, I'll slide that one in.
Yeah, wow. Well, anyhow, I think that we can bring it to a conclusion now. I've enjoyed the discussion, and quite interesting. I'm glad you suggested a topic, because I was so focused on what I was preparing for, what I was doing, that I to think in another vein was just kind of escape me. You get into a modality sometimes; it's hard to jump out into something meaningful, useful. So I appreciate that, Daryl. Great to have you with us tonight, and
it's good to be here.
Yeah. Appreciate you so much. And Chris, good to have you with us. So let me just kind of bring this to an end, and we're gonna end the broadcast, and we'll do that. I'm gonna stop the stop